Well, welcome everyone. I am very excited that we are now at the second of our four-part spring workshop series. And today we have a really treasured guest that I will introduce to you. But this is Chip Osborne. Now, I probably have known about Chip Osborne for about, I think it might have been about 8 or 10 years ago. You spoke at the Wellesley Cancer Prevention Project. I was on their board of directors, and we were trying to find, really expert people on different topics that we could present to the general community. And Chip was just amazing and one of our favorite speakers. So I thought he would be a wonderful person to have in our spring series. And just to give you a little bit of background about Chip Osborne, he has been, and let me also share let me just share the slides I have so people, yep. Um, okay. Yeah, so creating the lawn of your dreams with the help of Chip Osborne. Uh-oh. I don't want it to do that. And what do I do now? Let's see. Stop. How do I stop that from going forward? I didn't want it to automatically do it. Let me see. View. Uh, I've never had that happen before when I put my slides up. Well, now you've seen all of the slides. Let me see. Uh, let's try new share. Hopefully this will work this time. All right. So, and as I was saying before the slides kind of took over themselves, so creating the lawn of your dreams uh, with Chip Osborne and a touch of Mother Nature. And as we've said, Chip is someone who has amazing experience. He has been a professional horticulturist for over 50 years. He's worked in nurseries, florists, and primarily what he does now is consulting to towns, communities, parks. He does public spaces all over the country. And he started out, as he will explain to you, using the typical pesticides, but over time decided to transition to more natural and organic lawn care or public space care. And about 2004, he started to expand what he was doing, got involved with the nonprofit organization Beyond Pesticides, which does fabulous work. It's out of Washington, D.C., and then started consulting on public lands all across the United States, including public spaces in Boulder, Colorado, which I think of as kind of an earthy, grainy place. So I thought, oh, this would be the perfect space to actually have a natural or organic public park. He's also worked in Colorado, Florida, Arizona, Texas, Illinois, Pittsburgh, Northern and Southern California, as well as his home base in New England. So he is a wealth of expertise and information. And I hope, as I sent out in the email to you, that you have a journal or a paper and pen with you, because I think you're going to want to take some notes here and try to have an open mind while you're listening and be fully present over the next hour. So if you can turn your cell phone, either, even if you just have the sound off so it doesn't ring, and hopefully you don't have any distractions. And hopefully it's before the kids come home from school, because we know how busy moms get and dads get at during that time. So, and this is just, you know, Chip and his company, Osborne Organics. So with that said, maybe you could talk to us, Chip, about how you got started in this in the first place. Like what led you to transition from using traditional landscaping or horticultural work to more natural and organic?
Sure. So, thanks for having me. This is something that I feel is extremely important. I honestly believe a lot of the illnesses and things that we are experiencing now have some of their origins in environmental factors. And those environmental factors are things that we come in contact with on a daily or seasonal basis. And in my work, that would be pesticides and synthetics in general that are used in the landscape. I began my career at the age of 22 in the greenhouse nursery florist business. I was actually headed to a different career at the time, but it took a little detour and engaged in a business with my dad in 1974 with the intention that I would work for a couple of years and help get this florist and greenhouse established and then turn it over to my dad. And it was always seemed to be one challenge after another. And one year led to 2 to 5 to 10. And next thing I knew, it was 37 years. Um, I started with all of my education in the early 1970s was entirely chemically oriented. I
Mhm.
was taught that to grow anything horticulturally, whether it was grass or plants or vegetables outdoors, or whether it was under the glass roofs of my greenhouses, I had to rely on synthetics. And I
Mhm.
had to use a laundry list of pesticides. The kinds of pesticides that we're talking about can be boiled down. There's many different kinds of pesticides, but just think of herbicides that are the weed killers, insecticides for insects, and fungicides to compromise or put back fungal diseases. So that was my education. And keep in mind, 1974, the pesticide world was only 25 years old. So there were so many unknowns, but they were taught to us as gospel. And I can remember products coming on the market, and they were gone in three years because they were so dangerous. Part of that problem, and I did this for 25 years, because that's what I was taught. But as my awareness began to grow and realize the significant flaws in the US EPA registration system, I began to question a lot of this.
Mhm.
Now, keep in mind, even today in 2024, the way pesticides are evaluated for use in commercial or in home landscapes is based on statute that was created in 1972.
Oh, wow.
Think of all these years later, and it's the same methodology, risk assessment, risk versus benefit. If the risk outweighs the benefit, it doesn't come to market. If the benefit outweighs the risk, it can come to market. But that was based on acute toxicity with laboratory animals, and everything was on an acute basis. What science and medicine is telling us now, and what I began to become aware of in the 1990s, was it wasn't necessarily this acute dose that they were testing. It
Mhm.
was low dose,
Mhm.
frequent or multiple low dose exposures, particularly to children over many years.
Mm.
That can cause more problems in the long run than sometimes a single acute dose. So we talk about the dose makes the poison, right? Low dose can be more damaging than high dose, than the higher one. So I became aware of this. So in the mid 1990s, I began to transition my commercial greenhouses away from synthetic pesticides. And I began to rely on natural strategies. I even had part of my greenhouse USDA certified organic.
Mm.
By 1997, 1998, I had teamed with a colleague in my hometown of Marblehead, Massachusetts, a housewife. And we became the perfect combination, the industry turncoat and a housewife. And we formed the Marblehead Pesticide Awareness Committee. And we talked to people through 1997, 98, 99. I gave organic lawn care classes. We talked in a non-alarmist way, what I call an awareness through education, to educate people what they did not know about a lot of these products that they were so willingly using.
Right.
By 1999, 2000, we had engaged with our Board of Health, and by 2001, the town of Marblehead adopted a pesticide, an organic pest management policy, which mandated that all town-owned land be treated without the use of synthetic fertilizers and chemical pesticides. In 2005, that was strengthened to regulation, and the town has been pesticide-free on public lands since that time.
Wow.
So that was how I got into it. And my driving factor with what I knew about things happening, and I experienced it firsthand in my own greenhouses. I used to breed English Springer Spaniels, and I always had a mother-daughter combination. And I lost both the mother and the daughter at under 10 years old. And their only crime was they played in the greenhouse where I was putting all this stuff down. Now, granted, their exposures were probably more acute and intense than what we would get in the landscape, but nevertheless, very quickly on, they died. And I began to realize that these products that I was being told were, quote, safe when used as directed, which is a term, by the way, you can't say because pesticides are poison by definition, so you can never say that they're safe. That was my experience. So then I took what I was experiencing, and I was concerned for my own children. I raised 4 children, and I didn't want them playing on athletic fields and public parks where pesticides were being used. So we moved out into the landscape and became a focus. I moved on from the greenhouse business after 37 years. And since 2004-05, I've had my consulting company with a focus on trying to improve the health and safety of public space for not just children, but for all of us to, enjoy and passively or actively use.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you bring that up because one of the things that, I mean, I do know that Marblehead, being an oncology nurse practitioner by background, I had always heard that Marblehead had a higher rate of breast cancer. And people were trying to figure out why is there a higher rate of breast cancer in Marblehead. And I think that for many of these chemicals that are used in public spaces, whether that's on people's lawns, in the parks, on athletic fields, where my daughter used to play not only soccer, but also do track and field. Initially, a lot of these companies were very, um, they saw a problem. They were trying to create a solution. They came with good intentions, and so I understand that part. And it's one of the things that makes our country so unique is that people can have these great ideas and bring things to market so that hopefully we can help solve some of these problems. But along the way, with time, we find out that some of these products aren't good for us. And so, the fact that you were noticing this with your Springer Spaniels and, transitioned to more natural and organic lawn spaces was also insightful on your part, because I think sometimes when we're used to doing things one way, like you said, we're trained that this is the standard that needs to be used. And yet your experience over time was showing you some of the ill effects of that. And so then transition to that more natural organic space and now do consulting with that. I love that you were able to take that in and make that decision to try to help, in your town of Marblehead, with your own children, with your pets, because this is something that I think for many parents, I see so many parents working hard today to give their kids a better life, not realizing some of the things that we do that maybe are impacting on their health. And, so I think some of the things that you're going to share with us today are going to help people to understand what they can do to create a better environment for their kids, their families, their, whether they have their own landscaping, lawn care program themselves, what they can do to keep themselves healthier. Because I'm sure this worried you a bit that you had been exposed over time to this.
Oh, I used to have the cholinesterase levels in my blood checked every 24 to 36 months to
Wow.
make sure that I wasn't slowly poisoning myself.
Yeah.
And, back in the days when I first started, all we did was wear a baseball hat, sunglasses, and buttoned our collars tight and put gloves on and
No
rolled
mask,
the sleeves
right?
down and a respirator
Oh,
mask
you did have a mask.
and
Okay, good.
goggles.
Good.
And that's the way it started. And 25 years later, by the time I moved on from pesticides, I had a full Tyvek suit with independent helmet and air pack and all of
Wow.
that. So the more and more we realized, what it was that we were working with. The seriousness of how we treated it was, continually, improved to the point that and for me, it had been 25 years doing this. And I had friends that, grew up in the same type of industries and they weren't so lucky.
Yeah.
They did not have good blood tests. And unfortunately, that's something that became chronic for them. But
Right. Yeah. So help us understand. I know that primarily you're working with public spaces, public parks, but can you, and a lot of the people here really have their own home, their own yard, but or maybe their own farm. How can you help us in terms of thinking about what we can do to especially for those that are using pesticides, or they have a landscaper come and they're spraying the pesticides every year, twice a year, however often they do, to transition to a more natural and organic system.
sure. So let me start with what, conventional or traditional lawn care is, and think
Yep.
of the 4-step program where, any of us can go to a garden center or a big box store and you buy a series of bags that you put down, based on the calendar and based on the, what you're trying to accomplish. So it's all really about an expectation, right? The
Mhm.
problem with expectations that we have now in the landscape is we can't lose sight of the fact that the expectations that many people have for their lawns, that was simply created by the chemical industry in the 1950s to sell product.
Yep.
Synthetic fertilizers and chemical pesticides came about in the 1950s, post World War II, and
Mhm.
then it moved into agriculture and then into lawn care by the late 1950s. And that expectation of monoculture of grass was created by the industry to sell their product.
Uh-huh.
Prior to that time, clover was part of every lawn. So clover is
Right.
not really a bad thing. It
My
brings
bunnies love it.
atmospheric nitrogen. It's a legume. It pulls nitrogen from the atmosphere, and through a collective activity with bacteria in the soil, it deposits nitrogen in the soil for grass.
Mhm.
So conventional lawn care, involves a series of synthetic fertilizers and chemical pesticides. You can either hire a landscape contractor or a lawn care company, or you can do it yourself.
Mhm.
And, I always am concerned about the homeowner that is a do-it-yourself that goes and buys these products and puts them down because they really don't understand, what it is they have in their hands.
Right.
Think about this. If you go out, I mean, I've seen situations where, guys will go out on a Sunday in a bathrobe and slippers and put down the weed and feed. Or people have their shoes on, they go out and do it, then they walk in the house.
Mhm.
granule on the bottom of your shoes gets deposited in a carpet. We know that kids lie down on carpets and put their face down. Think about it. One granule of a pesticide in that carpet won't break down for 5 or 6 years
Oh,
because
wow.
there's no sunshine and no bacteria to do that. So that's in the house and it stays there. So as a homeowner, you have to be really careful. So I looked at all of that. I knew my concerns from my industry, and my focus was trying to educate the homeowner in a non-alarmist way. Back in the early 2000s, I did lots of public speaking to
Mhm,
garden clubs and citizens groups to educate that. So the alternative to that, what I consider to be the more risky type of lawn care, and the reason that conventional lawn care has taken such a big hold is its quick fix, instant gratification. And as a society, as Americans, we want everything done yesterday.
mhm,
And we don't have a lot of patience. So we want that perfect expectation and we want it in a month. And that's what a lot of these products can do.
mhm,
The alternative to that is organic lawn care or natural turf management, two terms that basically mean the same thing.
mhm,
So that's putting aside synthetics and relying only on natural products to grow the grass, the vegetable garden, the perennial border, whatever part of the landscape it may be, trees. I mean, we do everything across the board in the landscape can be done organically. First step that we need to understand is the big difference is all of those chemical products are water soluble, right? The
mhm,
pesticides are water soluble, they work quickly. The fertilizers are water soluble, they work quickly.
mhm,
So you get the directions to water it in when it's done. Organic fertilizer, moisture doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the microbes in the soil, specifically bacteria, that interact with it and break it down. And then one organism feeds on another. And as one digests the other organism, the byproduct is nitrogen that goes right into the grass.
mm,
So I always tell people the first thing that we do when we look to transition, we're not looking to swap out product. We don't want to say this is bad, what's the better alternative? Because if we simply swap across the board, we'll probably fail. The
mhm,
most important thing that we want to get in our back of our head is that we're now managing a system. And that system, whether it's a tree or a vegetable garden or a lawn or a hydrangea, is
mhm,
everything you see above the ground, but most importantly, what you don't see below the ground. And
mm,
it's those organisms that create healthy, biologically active soil that in turn create healthy, resilient plants. Believe
mhm,
it or not, when you take a when you take a lawn or plant material off of chemicals and transition it to organic, the landscape improves. It doesn't get worse, it gets better. So as we think about our lawns now and what we want in order to create that, what I call one of my little trademark things that I've done over the years is what I call a living lawn, a lawn for living. And that's really what we want, is we want a place where we can go out and enjoy it and still meet a reasonably good set of expectations. I mean, a great set of expectations. Organic lawn does not mean full of weeds. It does not mean that we're going to be continually struggling. But
mhm,
there are certain steps and protocols that we follow, and some involves product input, and some involves cultural things like seeding and overseeding or aerating to relieve compaction and introduce oxygen. So
mhm,
when I put together a program or talk to a homeowner, and if folks see this and they have questions for me, by all means, email me and I'm happy to answer a question. I don't directly consult at this level, but certainly happy to troubleshoot. You want to do a soil test. I mean, simply if you're in Massachusetts, it's the University of Massachusetts. And it's very inexpensive. You go
mhm,
on their website. The first thing I do when I talk to homeowners is they get a soil test because, excuse me, you don't know what you need until you find out what's there or what's not there.
yeah.
So
And
you
I
go
think
on
it's
the
only
university.
about $18. the last time I
Yeah,
did.
I think now it's about 30
Oh,
because at
30. Okay.
UMass, you have to add the organic matter on as an add-on,
Uh-huh.
25 or $30.
I see.
And it's just umass.edu, and in the UMass search engine, type in soil test, and it will take you right to plant sciences, and you download the form, follow the directions, and send the sample in. At this time of the year, they're really busy, so
Mhm.
it's going to take about a month to get the results back, but that becomes your roadmap and tells you what you need to do.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and the sense that I get, because I'm oftentimes thinking from a medical perspective, but one of the things that we learned over time is that our gut is like our second brain. And so when we were introducing so many antibiotics into our system, the kids had an ear infection and then they had, a strep throat, and they're constantly getting antibiotics. It changes that microbiome in the gut. And once you change the microbiome in the gut, it's not as healthy as it was before. And then other things can happen in other parts of your body, because what's happening in the gut oftentimes influences the health in other systems in your body. So listening to how you're describing this, and the bacteria within the soil and all the different organic matter or organisms, whether it's like little worms or insects or whatever that's in the soil, and how the nitrogen gets collected to naturally fertilize the soil, right? And help it to be healthier. It sounds like a similar, that whole wisdom of Mother Nature, right? How Mother Nature cares for itself and helps it to be healthier, right? In terms of the lawn.
That's exactly right. The parallels between the two are, distinctive.
Yep.
And just, when you talk about that, it's just an interesting little side note that, many of you have probably heard of what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years with a chemical called Roundup, and
Mhm.
being linked as a, possible / probable human carcinogen, and the lawsuits and all that. But what a lot of people don't know is 40 years ago, Monsanto took out a patent on Roundup. Glyphosate is the active ingredient. So they took out a patent on glyphosate as an antibiotic. So
Oh,
it can act as an antibiotic in the soil. It can also act as an antibiotic in the human gut, particularly with the applicator,
yep.
but certainly anybody that gets, an exposure along the way. So yeah, the compromising, beneficial biological activity is, one of the big downsides of the synthetics in the
Mm.
landscape.
Oh, interesting. I was not aware of that. Thank you for sharing that. So in terms of this natural organic system, how long would you say it takes to transition from having a pesticide driven, that 4-step process that you talked about, to a natural organic system? Because and correct me if my thinking is wrong, but I'm thinking that as you transition, it may initially, because it's not getting that chemical, it may look a little bit less vibrant than it was, but then it will, once the soil becomes healthier, then it will actually look the same or even better. Am I
Yes,
thinking correct?
yeah, that's accurate. So when we're transitioning, years and years ago, people would say when you move from chemicals to organic, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But when it gets better, it's going to be really good and
Mm.
you'll be really happy. And that's what happened for sure.
Yep.
Now, with what we know, and sort of the way science has taken product development and what we know about the biological side of things, I mean, when I do my soil testing for my big projects, all the soil goes under a microscope, and I identify all the little critters that are there. and which ones are working and which ones aren't working, which are present, the ones that are absent, and then the ratio from one to another. So we really take it to that level.
Wow.
Obviously, as a homeowner, you're not going to do that, but we've developed enough of a knowledge to be able to tell you that it's not just about going out and buying fertilizer. Certainly, fertilizer for the grass is part of it, but the other part of it is providing food in the form of carbon for the microbial community. So the principle is feed the soil, and the soil will in turn feed the grass or the plant. So how long does this take? Well, for the average homeowner lawn is probably about a year and a half. For a municipal, a public property, an athletic field, it could be 3 or maybe even 4 years. And the length of time, it's variable because it depends on some factors. If we have a lawn that has been relatively heavily, involved with pesticides, and particularly the herbicides, the weed killers, and they don't kill weeds per se, they're temporarily suppressing them from the system. When you stop, they're going to come back. That's why they always sell you the treadmill. We're going to do it this spring and next spring and the following spring, or this fall, next fall. That's the treadmill effect. That's what makes these folks money. So if we have that kind of an approach, we expect to see very few weeds, but probably somewhat of a compromised biological fraction. If we have a lawn that has not had chemical treatment, maybe it's had organic fertilizer, maybe it hasn't had much of anything, which I call, what I call organic by neglect, more or less. Then I expect to see weed pressures that could be anywhere from 10 to 25 or 30%.
Yep.
But I'd also expect to see a pretty robust biomass, so they are not compromised. So you take those factors together, and then we determine how long it's going to take to do it. So if I have a lot of crabgrass is always a biggie, right? We have crabgrass in a lawn. Excuse me. Crabgrass was brought to the United States in the mid-1800s by the U.S. government as a forage crop from China, but it didn't work as forage crop, and now we have it as an invasive warm season grass that grows all over the 50 states.
Right.
So with crabgrass, it germinates in the spring when soil temperatures get warm, lives through the hottest time of the year, and then dies out when it gets cooler. The range varies from the northern part of the country down to the southern part of the country. If I want to get rid of that without herbicides, without the synthetics, it's probably going to take me the full year and a half. And how do I do that? I would aerate the lawn. I would loosen the soil. That also infuses oxygen, stimulates grass, stimulates microbes. I'm going to give it my organic fertilizer. I'm going to give it some carbon. Compost is great. Anything that's a humic substance is carbon. Molasses, fantastic carbon source, stimulates biological life. So we're improving that. And then we're going to overseed in the spring, overseed in the fall. One of my first projects way back in 2002 was an athletic field that had broadleaf plantain all over it. In a year and a half, we got rid of all the plantain.
Wow.
Because we did those practices and we supported the grass and discouraged the weed. Same thing holds true for crabgrass. I did a pilot site that was 65 to 70% crabgrass.
Wow.
18 months later, it was 3 or 4%.
Wow.
And you could pick them out in a half an hour and be done with it. So that's how we do it. So it's not quick fix, instant gratification. It absolutely is gratification, but it's a matter of having some patience and investing some time, into the process. The other part of it in transition is everybody has to have their own personal choice on what they think of clover. And, I manage some properties where I can't have any. It just is not that it's not the expectation that's presented to me. I have other properties where it's encouraged.
Right.
And we have a reasonable balance of it. So And then I have properties where they intentionally overseed a lawn with clover. Because if we overseeded a lawn with clover and we cut the grass and leave the grass clippings right on the lawn, you would never have to buy a bag of fertilizer. It would
Oh, wow.
completely take care of itself.
Wow.
So
I
there's
did.
different ways that, homeowners can approach it. But the place that I always have people start is with expectation.
Mm-hmm.
If we are looking to manage high quality grass at high expectation, we're probably going to be able, or not probably, we will be able to manage to what I call less than 5% weed pressure per acre. Now, an
Wow.
acre is 43,560 square feet. So if 3 or 4% of that has a weed here and a weed there, it really isn't that much that if somebody really got bothered by the occasional weed, they could easily, go along and have the landscape contractor pop it out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that's how we define high-end management. Modest management is 10 to 15% weed pressure. And then the freedom lawn or low expectation probably pushes up closer to 20 to 25% weed pressure. The definition of modest, weed pressure or medium expectation is, like I said, that 10 or 12, 15% weed pressure, which if you walk through, you can see a weed here, a weed there. But from the street, it's thick, it's lush, and it presents very well from the curbside. So it's not like you notice a whole sea of weeds. But the homeowner to transition, that would be the expectation. First, decide what you want to see,
Mm-hmm.
and then, we determine the right strategy to try to achieve that goal. And the most important thing to understand is, as a counterpoint to that 4-step program, there is not just one organic program. We
Mm-hmm.
can develop the intensity of a program to meet any one of those expectations. Think of that back to that 4-step. If you only buy 2 of those bags, you're not going to get the same results as if you purchase all 4.
Wow.
So we translate that same thing over onto the organic side.
Mm-hmm. So one question I have for you, you said composting. You could put composting on the grass to help it to fertilize it, to help it to grow well. What about manure? Can you, for a regular lawn, would you put manure on it, like horse manure? Or?
Well, horse manure, probably not, because horses their digestive tract can't break down weed seeds.
Oh, okay.
Dairy manure, cow manure, they have their second stomach and their gut will break down a weed seed. But we typically try to stay away from manures because manure is high phosphorus.
I see.
And once you get phosphorus levels high, you can't get rid of it. So you would try to stay. Turf grass should not have any phosphorus to speak of,
Okay.
because it just doesn't need it. So when we talk about compost nowadays, we tend to try to choose composts that don't contain manures. You'd never put straight manure or dehydrated manure on a lawn, but even composts that have a manure component. The best compost are vegetative wastes,
Mhm.
food waste, leaves, wood chips, grass clippings, that type of vegetative material. People always ask me, what's the one thing I could do that would make the biggest difference in transitioning? And it would absolutely be using a good compost.
Mhm.
We only want it down about 1/4 of an inch. So a little bit goes, a long way. It's about a half a cubic yard per 1,000 square feet. Half a cubic yard, to get an idea, is probably 13 or 14 bags of compost from a garden center or a nursery, or about 1/3 of a pickup truck. And you just rake that into the lawn, 1/4 of an inch thick, spread it out really thin, put some grass seed right on top of it, water it in. Ideally, if you can aerate, have your landscape contractor aerate the lawn first. You put those holes in the lawn, and then the compost falls right down in those holes. and within a month, you wouldn't recognize the lawn. The best time to do that would be late summer, early fall in the cool season regions of the country.
Good to know. Um, so when you say 13 or 14 bags, you talking about an acre? 13 to 14 bags per acre?
Per 1,000 square feet.
Oh, okay.
It's 1/2 cubic yard per 1,000. So in residential turf grass management, we always talk in units of 1,000 square feet. When
Okay.
we're dealing with big athletic fields and things, then we talk in acreage.
Wow. So that could be a lot of bags for a athletic field.
Oh yeah, in athletic field, we're using it in bulk. We buy it by the truckload. And it
Wow.
comes in because to do a football field or a soccer field, it takes about 30 cubic yards to top dress the whole soccer field. But and that's how I've transitioned many athletic fields doing that method. And a $3,000 to $4,000 investment, one-time investment, makes a huge difference, down the road.
Yeah. And not only a huge difference to what the athletic field looks like, but a huge difference for the athletes that have to play on those fields, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. Yeah. And
they're doing their best and they're working hard to win the game, and they may slide or they may fall, they may be getting their face plants in that athletic field. So having a nice natural or organic athletic field would be so much better for their long-term health than,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
traditional one. Because especially, the work that I do, the times when it is most important to protect the genes for long-term health is in pregnancy, young childhood, and adolescence. So from adolescents, they're involved with a lot of sports, 8 years old to 25 years old. So if you can keep them healthier during that time and protect their environment, protect them from, the environment, then they will have a better chance at a longer, healthier life. So this is why what you're saying, Chip, is so important for parents to know.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, think about it, that if we subscribe to, conventional chemical management and we do follow the route of that 4-step program or hire our landscape contractor to make those applications, you may be told that it's safe when it's dry to the touch, right? If they're spraying a pesticide down, that's right. Well, that has nothing to do with it. There's
Mhm.
something in a pesticide called a half-life. And the
Okay.
half-life is how long it takes for 1/2 of the active ingredient to break down.
Uh-huh.
1/2. And that's to break down in the environment. Now, if you listed all the typical lawn care chemicals, the half-lives run from 10 to 70 days. So
Hmm.
think about that. That could be 140 days to break down all of that material. So whether it's wet or dry, that's irrelevant.
Hmm.
So, now we have this low dose exposure to the kids in the backyard that could maybe go on for a week or 10 days.
Yep.
Then they go out the next week at that season of the year and they're on a soccer field that may have been treated for weeds. It may have had grub control, insecticides. It could have any one of a number of different things. So now you can see from an early age, we're getting that multiple low dose exposures, and it
Right.
potentially could be with some frequency. And then that can go on, just like you said, from 6 to 25.
Right.
And that is the reality. And that's what new science is telling us. That's why the EPA model from 1972 is just so outdated on how these chemicals are registered.
Right. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. That was super helpful information. Um, so I thought it might be helpful if we look at some examples of what the outcome could be, so people get, a visual in their mind of what things could look like. So let me um, go back to the slides here for a moment. And let's see. let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So maybe you could share with us, these are all projects that you've worked on, correct?
These are all different projects that I've worked on. On the top middle is a horse pasture
Mm-hmm.
in the northern regions of the country, and that was all built out organically. We created a specific soil with high organic matter, and it's had organic fertilization ever since. Um, on
That
the
grass is
top
absolutely
left,
gorgeous, Chip.
that's a pretty picture. That's early. That's in the early spring, which is the best. In New England, early spring. That some of the best grass of the year is, in late April, early May, and then again in October.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's
So
that type
rich
of.
looking.
Top left is an NCAA soccer field
Oh,
that
wow.
I managed, and it was organic for 3 years. That soccer field's not there anymore. They tore it all up and put a new one in because the soccer coach wanted a different type of grass.
Oh,
Uh,
gee.
but we kept that, looking like that for an extended period of time. Bottom left is just a local municipal little league baseball field. Again, early spring,
Mm,
showing what that can look like. The bottom center is a residential property
that's
that is
gorgeous also.
a 3-year organic lawn. Top
Mhm.
right, same thing, large residential open space, midsummer,
Beautiful.
2-year organic lawn. And then the bottom right is a public park in New York, and it's not a monoculture of grass. It's very appropriate for a public park. It's beautiful. It looks
Mm,
great. It meets all the needs of this community on Long Island.
yep.
Um, but there is clover in there. You're going to find an occasional weed in there, but the overall presentation is outstanding. And it was
Mm,
never a mandate from the community that this had to be made into a monoculture. And that has been managed organically now for almost 8 or 9 years in my own town of Marblehead, Massachusetts, which is the bottom left there, going on 22 consecutive years of organic management with no synthetics.
oh, and the benefit of all those children that have played on that baseball field too, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, oh, these are absolutely spectacular. I mean, the grass is just uh it's so gorgeous, especially that farm. How look at how green that grass is against the contrast of the red barns. Really beautiful. And I love the that little park with the gazebo in the middle there. It's so beautiful. And how nice for the community to actually walk through here and feel like they can enjoy it, but nothing's going to impact on their health. They can feel very relaxed and comfortable enjoying it, and their kids can enjoy it, and their pets can enjoy it, right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, makes a huge difference because, as we know, we all love our pets, and then you want to pet them, and then you pet them, and especially if your kids pet them and they're putting their hands in their mouth, and you know, who knows what they're getting in their mouths. So that was fabulous. And then this is yeah, so I'm wondering, Chip, because we're getting towards the end of our time, are there any words of wisdom that you would like to share that you haven't shared already with some of our participants that might be helpful to them
Well,
around?
I think that, I guess a lot of what you hear is that organic or natural, when it comes to managing the landscape, doesn't work. It's too expensive. The landscape is going to deteriorate. You won't get good yields in your vegetable garden. Your trees are going to suffer. Your ornamental beds won't look as good, and grass is going to become all weeds. And at the end of the day, that is just information that's put out by the chemical industry to scare people away from trying organic.
Mm-hmm.
If we understand, like I said, that there is an expectation that we address, that there is a transition period, it's about choices of different materials that not only directly go to what you can see, it's the grass, but that feed the soil. And I can't stress enough that if you feed the soil will feed the plant.
Mm.
And we just try to get that. It's a different thought process, because when you typically get fertilizer, you think that you're giving food to your plant. But there is absolutely no food for any plant in fertilizer. Fertilizer is simply a raw material. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are raw materials. So we all have to get that idea out of our head that we have food in those bags for our plants.
Mm-hmm.
What we have in there are raw materials that stimulate the grass plant or the vegetable or the tree in such a way that it allows it to more efficiently undergo the process of photosynthesis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we probably all bumped into that word back in high school at some point in a biology class, photosynthesis. And this is one of the first things that I teach homeowners is, think about that. We have the green in the plant leaf, whatever kind of plant that may be, and that's chlorophyll.
Mm-hmm.
And the raw materials in fertilizer make that greener. It intensifies the chlorophyll. Chlorophyll on the underside of all of our leaves are microscopic openings called stomates. Now, if we have sun's energy and we have a green leaf and we have these openings in the presence of carbon dioxide and moisture in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide goes right into the grass plant. A chemical reaction happens with chlorophyll, and that produces carbohydrate, sugar, and amino acid, and that's plant food. All of our plants make their own food. 80% of that carbohydrate food energy that's produced goes into the root of the plant, and half of that leaves the root and goes into the soil, where we're not only feeding microbes, we are sequestering carbon. And that's a big deal, right? We're taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and sequestering it as carbohydrate in the soil, or carbon in the soil. So always keep that in mind, that when we're using organic fertilizers, that's what we're doing. We're simply facilitating a way for the plant to more efficiently work with the soil and the microbes in the soil to give the plant what it needs. So we understand that, and that's what takes a little bit of time to get going. Now, we mentioned that we are not quick fix, instant gratification. So very often it can take the first year of transition just to get the microbes accustomed to having this energy and this food source there, so that it can more efficiently produce what it needs to. At the end of the day, when we make these choices, we are going to find that we have a livable space outside that will exceed our expectations. It will absolutely be as good as its chemical counterpart or better. And we will have the peace of mind of knowing that we have created safe space for ourselves and our families.
Yeah, thank you for explaining all of that, because it's I have ancestors that were big in terms of creating public parks and were florists, and they were full of wisdom. My mom got the gene, my daughter got the gene. I just passed on the gene. So oftentimes I've been clueless to what to do with plants and grass and all this other stuff. So this is, your wisdom is so helpful, so very, very helpful. And I know I've seen the results over the years with all the patients I've taken care of, but it's so helpful for so many families to, as you said, that when you create the right environment in a natural way, Mother Nature takes care of the rest. And then you can have a beautiful, not only a beautiful space, a beautiful yard, a beautiful public space, a beautiful athletic field, but it's also safer for.
That's absolutely, and you know,
kids.
one more comment that I will make is that with everything that I do and all the education and all the understanding of organic in the landscape, at the end of the day, my best understanding of how to do this is simply to mimic nature and
Uh-huh.
mimic what nature already has in place in undisturbed environments.
Mm,
Because nature has it right in an undisturbed environment, a natural area, but we're now talking in disrupted areas and managed landscapes, which is very different. But my best understanding of how to create that in a healthy way comes
mhm.
from simply trying to mimic what nature is doing.
Wow. Oh, yeah, you have cultivated a enormous amount of wisdom and expertise in this field. So, as Chip Osborne said, this is his company here. His name, his company, Osborne Organics. This is his website. You can go to his website and he has all kinds of information there. And again, the examples of spaces that he has helped to transition to natural organic public lands in 30 states across this country. And starting out with his own Marblehead and based right here in New England in southern Maine, which is a really treasured area of New England. And these are some of the things that, most of what he does now is consulting for organizations, for these big public spaces in towns or, communities across the country. But if you do have a particular question, you can always email him. And I think your email is on your website, right, Chip? If they go to your website here.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were saying that I'm big on the environmental working group. So many of you probably know of the environmental working group. They were calling Chip to help out with one of their projects they're involved in right now. And yeah, so a lot of these, major organizations turn to him for his expertise. And we are so fortunate to have had his wisdom here today. So I really, really appreciate everything that you shared. And, you know, I think everyone here feels quite blessed to have heard what you had to say. So with that, we thank you so much, Chip.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yes.
the kind words.
I hope the rest of your spring goes fairly smoothly, because I know this is the busiest time of year for you, probably the spring and the fall, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have a wonderful summer then up in Maine.
All right. You too. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.